I really had my doubts about the Sonic movie, as I'm sure many others did. When I went to watch the film, I was expecting to be mildly entertained by a fairly generic road trip movie featuring Sonic, or entertained by the trash fire that this film could have ended up as. Well, unfortunately, they changed the design, so I wasn't getting that. If you want a quick summary and review, the Sonic movie is good. Not brilliant, not terrible, but good, and a surprisingly thoughtful film for adults and a riot for the kids. Mileage may vary though if you hate blue hedgehogs. I came away mildly entertained but very impressed with what the filmmakers were able to pull off. It was a really nice surprise in the sense that it gave me a lot to analyse and speculate on. So with that said, I'm going to get into a spoiler heavy discussion on the film, so watch at your own discretion. I'm going to talk about the character development and themes portrayed in the film. So if you want to go in blind, you've now been warned. So let's jump into it! The story is an origin story for both Sonic and Robotnik, which is to say they don't bear too many similarities to their video game counterparts at the beginning of the movie, but by the end develop closer to the characters that fans are used to, and I'm not just talking about looks. I think this is for the best. Sonic lore is so rich and dense, it's difficult to know what to extrapolate, and yet we've never had a proper origin story for these characters. So I think this decision was actually the most interesting one to make. It's friendlier on general audiences and kids who may not be familiar with the source material. In addition, the film has some great flavour text and exposition that shows the creative team really did their homework. They flesh out the world and its characters enough, I feel, to satisfy long-time fans, and it really gets my mind racing to where they could take the story in a potential sequel. A sequel that may already be on the cards, if the sales of the film on its opening week are anything to go by. But I'm jumping ahead of myself, so let's talk about Sonic. Sonic is voiced by Ben Schwartz, who I believe does an excellent job. Schwartz's voice is perfectly balanced between being animated and energetic, as anyone would expect of the blue blur, while giving him a realism that brings him into the live action setting. I was very interested in the characterization of Sonic himself. Sonic has always been a difficult character to resonate with. The different ways the character has been depicted hasn't helped matters. In the 90s westernization of the character, Sonic was cocky, overconfident, and often mischievous, but there wasn't really any real justification given to Sonic to be depicted this way, other than to give Sega an avenue to project their own edge to contrast against the more family-friendly icon of Nintendo's Mario. More recently, modern Sonic has been depicted as being overconfident, self-aware, and kind of a jerk, but again with no justifiable reason, especially within the context of the games. In this film, Sonic has moments of overconfidence, but is mostly a ball of hyperactive childish joy. This could have been quite annoying, but I feel it's natural and justifiable since he is quite literally a child or a teen experiencing the world for the first time. Before now, he's only been able to observe from a distance. This, alongside the vulnerability they allow Sonic to express in this film, makes him a really endearing character to me. After being forced away from his home and the protection of his mentor and parental figure, Longclaw, Sonic is instructed to do what he does best: run, and never stop running. Hide from anyone who might want his power. I was completely caught off guard by how heartbreaking the first few minutes were. My only issue at this point was how brief the scene was, but then again, I wouldn't want to linger on the trauma of a 5-year-old too if I was the Sonic the fucking Hedgehog movie. Not saying they couldn't do it, but I understand why in this instance they opted not to. The film then skips 10 years later to show how Sonic has made his home in Green Hills and lives vicariously through the townsfolk. For 10 years. The film acknowledges this for humour, but also as the main event that kickstarts the plot of the film. Sonic plays a late night baseball game with himself. In what would usually just be a fun scene that gives the audience an idea of how fast Sonic is, it is also the scene where Sonic realises how alone he really is. He has no one to play with, no one to spend time with, no one to share these experiences with, and no one to see his accomplishments. It's Sonic's realisation of his loneliness and subsequent emotional outburst that causes his powers to explode out of control. This is the catalyst that leads to the power getting knocked out on the West Coast and arouses suspicion for the government to investigate. This might be a reach, but I believe the running in circles on the baseball pitch is symbolic. It comes at just the right moment in the film and represents Sonic being directionless in his life. and the energy surge symbolises a cry for help. Sonic even lets out a yell at the precise moment he unleashes his energy. But, what do I know? It is, however, confirmed later in the film that Sonic unleashing his energy in this way is an emotional response. It triggers when he lets his emotions get the better of him. In a scene around the midpoint of the film, Sonic has a somewhat irrational response to Tom telling him that he's planning to leave Green Hills. I could liken this to the sensation of bottling up your emotions and letting it all out, usually in a heated conversation. When you say things you regret, but before you can come to your senses, it's too late and you can't take the words back. The damage is already done. Quite literally in Sonic's case. I saw a lot of critics say this emotional response came out of nowhere, and I disagree. Sonic's upset comes from not understanding Tom's choice to up and leave a home where he is loved and needed, as Sonic was ripped away from his home without the choice. At this point in the story, Sonic hasn't matured enough to understand why someone would leave their home unless it was for their own safety. I want to take a small break from Sonic to finally start talking about Dr. Robotnik. Jim Carrey fucking nails it. When Carrey was first announced for the role, I thought it was a joke, and was personally quite dismissive, but after watching Carrey being interviewed about the character, and now after seeing him in action, I can say with confidence that Carrey gets the Mad Doctor. In fact, based on the interviews alone, I'd say Carrey's understanding of the character exceeds some fans and even Sega's own understanding of the character. If Sonic is a character forced into a state of loneliness, that so desperately wants to make friends to grow and share experiences with, but can't, then Dr. Robotnik falls on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Dr. Robotnik is lonely because he wants to be. The way this plays out in the film is somewhat subtle. We learn through two interactions in the film that Robotnik was an orphan and that he was bullied when he was younger. They're small details, but they give us a peek into Robotnik's background, his past. Carrey's interview also backs up this backstory.
Sonic is the innocence he can no longer connect with.
Exactly.
He wants to own it,
Right.
but he can never be it. Right. To me, there's nothing like the combination of genius and a sense of absolute worthlessness. And where does worthlessness come from except neglect, abuse, so I figured there's no way this guy couldn't have had parents. He had to be part of the system, and again, so he grows up creating systems.
I think the last line about creating systems is very enlightening. Prevalent throughout the film is Robotnik espousing the virtues of his machines and his own achievements. He places himself on a pedestal above everyone else. He even at one point says to Agent Stone, Robotnik shows constant disregard for human life, even to those who admire and are loyal to him. That kind of writing speaks for itself, but it also infers, again, how he was treated. You'll almost want to sympathise with him. But the film makes it clear, Robotnik is a character that, while abused and neglected, chose the wrong way forward. Fixated on scientific achievements, robots with military application, and isolation from others, he will seek the admiration of others, but only if he's in control of them. Robotnik is in active pursuit of Sonic throughout the film, and Sonic is running away. But along the way, Sonic makes a friend. He realises that there's so much on Earth he hasn't done yet, and may never get another chance to do them once he leaves. Yet Sonic, while hesitant, remains determined to do what he was told to do and run and keep his power out of evil hands. Ironically then, it's Eggman's hubris that leads to his downfall, and inadvertently teaches Sonic a valuable lesson. During the final battle, Eggman is able to use Sonic's power against him, and Sonic realises he can't run away from his enemies. They eventually will catch up with him. He realises that in order to protect your friends, livelihood and well-being, confrontation must be faced head-on, and it's in this moment Sonic learns to use his power to fight. This ultimately becomes Robotnik's downfall. For all of his genius, he doesn't learn, and this leads to his defeat and pushes him to the worst parts of himself. In the end, Sonic has fought and preserved his happy existence on Earth and made a friend in Tom. He has a purpose, and this helps him develop his confidence and personality. In contrast, Robotnik ends up more alone than he started, and we see that his sanity is lost. And yet even in this state of absolute defeat, Robotnik refuses to learn and touts his own genius.
There's a power guy here. I'll be home by Christmas.
Which brings him a lot closer to the Robotnik we know, in terms of personality. I think many people could easily conclude that the story is about friendship, but I personally feel that a case could be made that there is a strong theme of loneliness. Sonic's loneliness and the plot of the film is resolved when he makes his presence known, makes a friend and learns how to keep his emotions in check, while Robotnik's loneliness festers and grows. It shows us the consequences of that isolation. I love how the film has handled these beloved characters and their development, showing where Sonic has come from and pulling him from the depths of loneliness, while displaying a hyperactive childish joy makes the character so endearing and gives him a lot of heart. Meanwhile, Dr. Robotnik, through his hubris, plunges further into that darkness and becomes more comically evil and imbalanced. This kind of development has been lacking in modern iterations of these characters, but I feel if the film franchise continues, I could easily see its trajectory closer to that of the adventure era Sonic and Eggman. Personally, this leaves me quite hopeful for the future of this film franchise. As an added bonus, the film's success might also be evidence that Sonic is still a popular character and not just a niche nostalgia franchise, as many in the community had feared. However, I do have to wonder, with the success of this film, the good reception of the Sonic Boom cartoon, and the animated shorts directed by Tyson Hesse, might there be a more prosperous future in animation and film for Sonic as opposed to video games? Food for thought. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Confidence. A fool's substitute for intelligence.